Okay, how to make a whistle, the simplified but three-part whistle. So you have a chunk of clay, hopefully the second half from what you did when you did your T-bowl project. You don't want to use all of the clay to make the whistle body itself, since you want to have some extra in order to do whatever your creation is. Large or small, so it just kind of depends on what your concept is and how much you're going to want to add on to this basic sort of pod shape that we're about to make. So, like I said, separate a little bit from the ball of clay that you've got left over, and I'm going to stick this aside, wrap it in plastic, so it doesn't dry out while I'm making this portion, okay? And you can kind of ball it up if you have a surface at home and can kind of toss it against the surface as sort of a fast and loose way to wedge the clay and get all those particles kind of broken and activated again so your clay's a little soft. Again, remember, if your clay is hard, I would squish it out or break it into pieces, get some water, and then put it in a bag, dribble some water over it into the bag and let it set and get nice and soft, because you want something pretty squishy. So this whistle is made in three little portions. So one portion is going to be the size of a dice. So you're just going to make a little cube. Okay? It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but a little cube of clay. Okay? That's going to set aside. And then a little more than half. Okay, and then the other part. So the part that's larger, I'm gonna make a small pinch pot out of. So just like we did with our T-bowl, sort of pushing your thumb in and then rotating around and pressing. Now this is a much smaller amount of clay, so it'll go much faster. And you also now know how to put a little pressure on your clay. You can use your thumb and your fingers. I'm making this into a little half dome shape. So I don't want to use my thumb so much that it just pancakes out, but I don't have to be quite as cautious, and it doesn't take nearly the amount of the time that it takes to press out a lot more clay. So I make this little dome. I want the tip of it also to be the same thickness throughout. So just like your T-bowl, you want this to be a little bowl where the walls are pretty even all the way through the bottom and everything. So just press it and make your little dome. Okay, so that's the second part for this piece. I'm going to set that guy down, and then with my last portion of clay, again, it's kind of easier if you roll it into a little bit of a ball, and then this one I'm going to just pinch out a little pancake of clay. So I take my time pinching here too, because if my clay is dry, or like this piece, I didn't really press it together too well. If you press too fast, you're gonna get big cracks. You don't wanna have those cracks, so just take your time as you press out at the edges and make a little pancake of clay. And about the same thickness as this little bowl that you made, okay? So the wall thickness and my little pancake. The thing that I need to do is press this pancake out so that when I put the little dome on top, I have a little bit of extra and that it covers entirely. So I'm gonna pinch this just a little bit more, because you'll see when I go to put these two together, it's nice to have a little edge on it. Okay, so just a little bit larger all the way around. Hopefully you can see that excess clay. And it totally covers the top. So I'm gonna end up with this little like turtle shell. So those are my three parts. Now I have to assemble them. So that means I need my bamboo skewer and I need a little bit of water, okay? So I'm going to score and slip and score so that I can get these two or three pieces all to attach to one another. Remember, when you're scoring, to go nice and deep into that clay. Don't be nice and gentle and make little marks. You really want to scruff into that surface, scratch and scruff and get little bits of clay to kind of stick up. That's important. I'm going to do the same thing on the rim of this bowl. Now my clay is really soft, so I should get a good connection here. If your clay is a little on the drier side, this step is even more important. So scratched up the edges there, scratched up the ring here. So now I've scored, now I've got to make my slip. So I'm just putting a little bit of water in that scored area, and now I score again to create my slip really. Get that gooey kind of peanut butter quality with your clay. Notice I'm not doing the center of this little pancake. I don't need to get this all ripped up. I actually want that to be fairly smooth so the inside of my whistle is fairly smooth. Though you won't see it, so it doesn't matter too much. Now I'm gonna put these two together. Okay, so I'm first gonna place it. I don't like it that way as much. That fits better that way. So it's sitting there. I'm gonna set it down and put a little bit of pressure just to make sure it's got a good connection, okay? And then I'm gonna go and blend over that little excess right on to the T-bowl side, or the bowl side, not exactly a T-bowl. And just blend that over so the seam disappears, and even some of the slip is sort of squishing out. I'm getting a little slippery here, which is okay. But you wanna just close that up. So now my seam is gone. I got little bits of clay. It's not very pretty at the moment, but at least I now have a little bubble of clay. No air holes. That's super important. No air holes. Okay? And you can smooth this out and take some time with it if you want to, but remember, the more you handle your clay, the more it tends to dry. So if you are doing smoothing, you might want to grab a little bit of water and do some of that. It sort of depends on what the ultimate shape of your whistle is going to be, what your design is on the surface, whether you need to even bother with cleaning at this point. Okay, so my whistle has a flat side. I can tamp it against the table, make sure it's nice and flat here. That's very important. And I've got my cube. The cube must be attached on the flat side. So this little igloo shape that I've created here. This cube has to be so that once it's attached, it's flush or flat with the bottom. I cannot put my mouthpiece here and have that work because it's not flat with the bottom. Okay, I can't stick it up here. So the placement of the mouthpiece is really important. It needs to be lined up so that it's flat with the bottom of your whistle. And again, I'm attaching clay to clay, so I'm going to score and score and water and score to make slip on one side. You don't need to make the whole thing a mess. And then I like to have this sitting down. Again, if you're at home and you don't have a table to work on, a piece of paper sitting on a textbook works. Set that down, set the cube so that it's on the surface, and then push it nice and snug into the side of your little bubble there. I'm gonna use my bamboo skewer and kind of slide it down and smooth these two pieces together. And because there's not a lot of connection point here, this is a small piece of clay that I'm attaching on the surface here, there's not a lot to really keep this well attached. And as you go on and design your whistle, this kind of connection you want to reinforce a lot. So it's like trying to connect two things here. There's not a whole lot of surface and it tends to break and crack really easily. Versus if you're attaching kind of larger surface areas, this can really bind and stick really well. So if I want to increase the size of this connection point, whether it's like this or two things like that, again, very weak sort of join there, I'm going to grab a teeny tiny little pinch of clay, teeny amount of clay, and I'm going to roll a small coil. You can do this in your hand, you can do this on a piece of paper on that textbook, and I want to make this teeny tiny piece of clay, smaller than even an earthworm, okay? Not quite toothpick thin, can't quite go that thin, but pretty thin. And I've got this nice handy cup of water, so I'm gonna dip mine in the water. You could just get a little on your fingers and get that a little bit wet so that it makes a good connection. And I wrap it around whenever I add something on that has this really small connection area. So I wrapped it around. I didn't do it on the underside here because I'm trying to keep this flat. But this little collar that I've put on here, I'm now gonna take my bamboo skewer, it's got a lot of clay built up on it already, and I'm gonna just sort of push that little coil right into the surface and blend it down onto the little dome shape and blend the other half of it kind of onto the mouthpiece shape. And I'm just creating a little more structure here, giving it a little more strength so that piece is gonna hold on. And I'm showing it to you here on the mouthpiece because I really want you to use this if you are adding something onto your whistle shape. Say you're gonna put bunny ears on them, you will want to put this bunny ear that's gonna have a really small connection point. So wrap it with a collar of that coil and then smooth in that coil, make it disappear. You can't tell that coil was ever there, but now I have a lot better, stronger connection with that small piece of clay, okay? So now my whistle piece is all attached. I've got my mouthpiece on, I've got my little bubble of air. So now I need to make this guy a whistle instead of a little hollow igloo, okay? So your popsicle stick, I've taken my popsicle stick and I've cut down and removed half of the thickness. If everybody had one, they're actually kind of harder to find these days, but if you have someone at home who drinks coffee and uses a wooden coffee swizzle stick, these are actually the perfect size and shape. They're just a little bit thicker than our craft sticks and they're narrower, but we can kind of get away with it by slicing our craft stick in half. Just regular old scissors, just cut through. I like to cut mine in half so I can keep the other side of my tool wide, but you can cut all the way through. If it breaks off, you can just use the part that's more narrow, but you do need it more narrow than the whole stick. It will not work with a big wide stick like this. And then I'm gonna push this stick through the mouthpiece and right into the body of this bubble of air. I wanna do it so that my tool stays flat, so that ultimately on the inside of the piece, this piece of wood is gonna be sliding in right underneath this one and makes it so that I can keep this piece of clay flat when I go to make the air hole. So I'm gonna get this guy lined up right in the center of the mouthpiece, and then I'm gonna push it through gently until I hit that air pocket, and then it slides right in really easily. So you'll feel resistance when you're in the solid part of the clay, and then it will slide in when you hit that air pocket. Now I'm gonna push kind of up on this side of the stick in order to make the other part kind of pushing out, and actually we're gonna rotate it. So I want the wooden stick to sort of press up against this wall of clay, so I push down on the other side to kind of get it to push that direction. I'm gonna hold it that way. Now I'm gonna take my bamboo skewer, and I've got to think about the wall of clay that's around the outside of the pod and this solid part here that's the mouthpiece. I need to make an air hole inside the air bubble. So I can't make the air hole over here because that would be right in the solid part of clay. I can't get a whistle sound from that. I also don't want to put the air hole right here because again, it would hit solid clay in the mouthpiece and the solid of the wall that comes across here. So think about this. You've got to put the air hole so that it's in where the pocket of air is. So there's this wall of clay that goes all the way around. And I want to put my air hole just inside. Okay? So keeping the wooden stick in, I'm going to push down through the clay until it hits the inside. I'm actually pushing against the wooden stick. And I'm going to cut out or sort of scoop out a little square or sort of square of clay. And I'm going to take out that little bit of extra, put that out of there. Doing this without looking. There we go. Sometimes it takes a few tries, and I got a bunch of smushed up clay. I'm going to get it out of the way. And hopefully you can still see the wooden stick in the middle there. A little clay in the way. There we go. So there's a wooden stick there, so when I pull that wooden stick out, it should go dark because now I go into the shadow of the darkness of this pod. Now mine, I have clay still sort of covering that spot. Hopefully you can sort of see. You can't see down into that air hole. So I can do two different things. One is I can use my bamboo skewer and kind of poke around in here and open that up. The other is to take a pencil, and I actually like this better. Push the pencil down into that air pocket, not through it, so be careful. And then I kind of rotate the pencil around and make a good size air hole. Not huge, don't go crazy, but a little bit bigger than the pencil itself. Sort of rock it and roll it around in there and make a good opening. Now you can hopefully see that it's nice and dark inside, but now I'm in the air pocket, and that's important. I'm gonna push the wooden stick through, kind of make sure that everything's still nice and open. And then I'm gonna put it back in place again. And now I have to create an angle on the outer wall of the air hole. Not the side with the mouthpiece on it, but the side opposite it. I've got to create a little angled bit of clay there in order to make the whistle sound, because an air hole itself isn't going to make the sound. So I'm going to wipe away all my little lines and other stuff here so that hopefully you can see. I'm going to take my bamboo skewer, I'm going to hold my little wooden stick, and I'm going to sort of squish and scrape away and create an angle. So see the angle of my tool? That's the angle of this little ramp that I'm going to make right here. So I'm going to push down in and sort of squish and scrape and create this little ramp. And it squished away some clay, so I'm just going to wipe that out of the way, hopefully, so you guys can see. It won't actually affect the sound at all, but just so you can sort of see what's going on. So now I have this ramp of clay that goes down at an angle, and it should be fairly sort of sharp at the bottom. So you want to press the tool right up against the wood and get that little ramp. Okay? And then I'm going to pull out the wooden stick. Make sure the air channel's still open, which mine is. It's sort of smushed a little bit, but I can still see down into the air pocket. And I get a whistle sound. Okay? At this point, don't mess with it anymore. If you mess with it, something will shift. If you keep blowing on it, your spit will soften this up and then it will stop whistling. So once you get a whistle sound, leave it alone. If you blow on it and don't get a whistle sound, you want to put that stick back in, and you probably want to go back in and just make sure you have a really nice angle and that the clay goes all the way down and touches the wood, that you don't have a gap in there. You can also go in and sort of push and clean up the walls and make them really clean and flat. But see how there's a ramp on the far side with an angle that's sharp down in the edge. So when I remove that wooden stick, look out, bring that out, it makes this really thin piece of clay right here, especially that lower edge. That's what's making the sound. You can see even by me messing with it a little bit, it softened it. But sometimes you gotta get in there and make small adjustments. So you can see mine whistled. Now it's not whistling as well. It's because I messed with it. So I can kind of repeat steps of pencil in there, wooden stick in there, get that angle back. Pull that wooden stick out careful. unless it doesn't whistle the first time, then you get to mess with it. Still not as strong. I would say if you make a sound though, stop there, don't keep messing with it. So I'm gonna leave that one alone. We're good now. So I like to let this set for 20-30 minutes. We're rainy today, but we won't be rainy all the time. So you can let it set out just so it firms up enough that then you can start building and adding. So you've got that remainder of clay. I think I'll put mine over here. And I've got all of this that I can mess around with. I can make wings for a bird. I can add a head on. I can add tail. I can do all kinds of things. You want to make a dragon or sky's the limit. You can make all kinds of things. So if I've got kind of a bird wing here, I would make both wings off of the piece. Don't put them on the piece to start with, but make them so that you can kind of match them up in size and shape. Once you put one on, you'll have a much harder time sort of matching it. That's a good tip. You can also texture. Remember, texture is a big part of this project. So you can use your popsicle stick, you can use objects around the house, all kinds of stuff. You got hairpins, bobby pins. They make great kind of stamping tools and texture tools. But you can come up with the shapes that you want to add. And if this is firmed up just a little bit, don't let it go dry, but just a little firmer, then you're going to score and slip and score. And then you can press on and attach all kinds of design elements to create your animal or creature or object, whatever it is that you've chosen. Just remember there's still a pinky rule. So I don't want to like stick a head on. I don't want to roll a ball of clay up here and go, okay, here's my bird's head. Oops, I did that backwards anyways, but that's okay. I don't want to put on a bird's head. This is solid. This is thicker than a pinky. This will blow off of the whistle in the kiln. Don't let that happen to you. So if I want to make something that's like thick or round or just thicker than your pinky, remove some of that clay. I don't need it all. And hollow it out. Get your finger inside. You can do that exact same kind of shape, but now I have a little pinch pot, and then when I go to attach this to the piece, I do the same thing with scoring and slipping and adding this guy on, and now he's not solid and he's not going to blow off. I just have to remember to also put a little air hole into that space so that I don't have a bubble and an expansion of air. And you'll notice I put the wing on backwards. If I do all of this, how am I going to get my mouth in there and blow on that mouthpiece? So keep that in mind. Wherever that mouthpiece is, it needs to stay where you can get to it. So maybe I wanted to put his head here and his wing here, and then I will blow literally into the side. You can put it as a part of the tail, but think about not blocking where that mouthpiece is going to be also. Okay? Have fun.